The information provided by Trading Forex Price Action to you does not constitute personal financial advice. The information provided is of a general nature only and does not take into account your individual objectives, financial situation, or needs. It should not be used, relied upon, or treated as a substitute for specific professional advice.
Weekly Forecast.
Hey guys, this is a weekly forecast for January 31st through February 4th of 2022. Alright, we'll start off with the Eurjpy. This is a weekly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since the last long trade that form was right here, and at this point right here, there was compact short price action that formed, which shows strong short strength. And so at this point on the weekly chart, the bias is short, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, we'll stay on this weekly chart for a full explanation of what's been happening in the price in this entire area right here. Please refer to the Forex Recap series. Okay, but the latest setup I'm looking at is that again, since the weekly bias is short, or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. Or in other words, the main stop loss is at this level, while the main target is at this level. I'm waiting for a pullback as much as possible so I could take a short entry, again with the stop loss at this pivot high. And so on this recent pullback right here, price got to about 8 pips to that short entry level. However, on the shorter time frames, price began to show short-term short strength and price fell all the way back down to these levels. So currently I'm watching the lower time frames to see if there's any short-term long strength that could perhaps get price right back up to these levels so I could take a short entry. So let me just show you what's happening on the lower time frames in these areas. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, if you recall in these areas right here, there are many signs of short-term long strength with many 1-hour trend lines having a breakout, then an immediate break back in, and so the close of the breakout candle and the opening of the break-in candle was at the same level, signaling short-term long strength. And so we got this move all the way up to these levels right here. And then furthermore, at this point right here, there's a 15-minute legitimate HNS that formed. Now, legitimate HNS shows short-term short strength, right? However, what I was looking for is for price to reach the right shoulder stop loss level before reaching this target height level, signaling that although there was short-term short strength from this legitimate HNS, the short-term long strength was able to override it and hit its stop loss level before hitting its target height level. However, that did not happen and price hit its target height level. So at this point, this was signaling that this 1-hour long strength was beginning to wane. And then moreover, on this 4-hour chart, on this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, I was looking at this breakout of this trend line right here to see if we could get any short-term long strength. However, as you can see, there was no immediate break back in, further showing that even on the 4-hour chart, this long strength was also waning. And so at that point, we got to pull back all the way down to these levels. And then this week at these levels right here, there was a 1-hour downward trend line, which was signifying this short strength was beginning to wane also. So in other words, there was a breakout of that downward trend line, and there was no immediate break back in. Okay, so as you can see, short strength on the shorter time frames began to wane at this point. Alright, so let me show you some trend lines that I'm watching to confirm the waning of this short-term short strength. So let's go over to the 1-hour chart. Okay, so on this 1-hour chart, there was partial confirmation of this waning short strength by a breakout of this trend line right here to right here, and an immediate break back in. Now at this point, in order to fully confirm this short-term long strength on the 1-hour chart, is for price to reach the last major pivot high, which is at this point right here. Okay, and price can do that, perhaps the short-term short strength will begin to revert into short-term long strength. Okay, so that's the 1-hour setup I'm looking at in order to get that further pullback long, so I could take that short entry roughly at the 131.60 levels. Alright, and there's one last thing I do want to explain, so let's go back to the... Okay, so on this 4-hour chart, like I explained earlier, when you're waiting for a pullback for a higher time frame trade, Watching the lower time frames is a great way to know whether you will get a pullback for that higher time frame short entry. So like I mentioned earlier, in these areas right here, there's 1 hour trend line breakouts confirming long strength on the lower time frames, pushing price all the way up to these levels. And then at this point right here, there's a 15-minute HNS that went its target height, showing that this lower time frame long strength was waning. And so as price came down at this point right here, because there was no immediate break back in to this 4 hour trend line right here, that signaled that even on the 4 hour chart, this long strength was waning. And so a trader can know that at this point, price is likely to come back down, not giving that further pullback. And then moreover, since I want to pull back to 131.60 levels for that short entry, at this point, I'm watching price to see if it's going to start basing out in this short-term short strength. Now on the 1 hour chart, it was showing signs of waning short-term short strength in these areas. Okay, so in this way, when you're waiting for a pullback for a higher time frame entry, it's wise to watch the shorter time frames to decide whether or not you will get a pullback for your entry on the higher time frames. Okay, all right, so let's go on to the euro dollar. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this price action right here was very strong short, and this move still having a ways to go, in the long term, I am short biased right back down to this pivot low right here. And then moreover, because of a breakout of this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here, and that breakout being right here, and since there is no break back in at this point, in the medium term, I'm long biased right back up to this pivot high right here. And finally, on the daily chart, since there was a weak long trade that formed and a strong short trade, and the daily bias was short, however, that target was just hit this week, in the short term, I am neutral biased. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, and if you're having trouble understanding what I'm talking about in terms of strong short trades and weekly biases and whatnot, please watch my price action trading course. For that course is designed to provide you the necessary information so you can understand these forecasts. Okay, this is a weekly chart. For a full explanation of what's been happening in the price in this entire area, please refer to the Forex Recap series. Alright, but the most recent move that happened was that on the daily chart, there was actually a weak long trade that formed and a strong short trade that formed. And so the daily bias was short, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot low right here before reaching this pivot high. However, there was a possibility that this short trade might have hit its main target at a monthly gap low at this level right here. I was only willing to enter a short trade if I get a nice pullback for the short entry. However, I did not get that pullback by about 6 pips, so I did not take this short entry. However, at this point, the extension target and also the main bias target at this point right here was hit at this point. Okay, so at this point on the daily chart, there are no biases. Okay, and furthermore, on this weekly chart, the last bias that formed, if you recall, was there was a weak long trade that formed and a strong short trade that formed. So I took 2 short entries roughly at this level right here, another one on this pullback with both stop loss at this pivot high and this main target at this level right here. And after that main target was hit, since there were no signs of lower time frame long strength at any of these points, I was still extending 10% of both those short positions to further levels down. And at this point, price is about to reach that target where I'm willing to take out another 5% of both short positions, roughly at these levels right here. So let me go ahead and show you that level where I'm willing to take out another 5% of both positions. Let's go over to the monthly chart. Okay, so on this monthly chart, that trend line is from this pivot to this pivot right here. Now if price could fall down and reach this trend line level right here, at this point, I will take out another 5% of both those short positions. Okay, all right, so let's go back to the weekly chart because there is a new weekly short trade that formed. So let's go over there. Okay, so on this weekly chart, this week there was actually a new weekly short trade that formed. And so at this point, I'll be waiting for a weekly long trade to form so I could gauge the strength between the two. And if there's more short strength than long strength, then I'll be short bias where price is likely to reach this pivot low before reaching this pivot high. And moreover, if this long trade is stronger than this weekly short trade right here, then the bias will be long. Or in other words, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And so at this point, I'll be waiting for this weekly long trade to form. Okay? All right, let's go on to the pound dollar. Okay, this is a monthly chart. We'll start off with an overview. So since this horizontal trend line right here just became legitimate with 1, 2, and this third touch right here, and since price has a tendency to want to test strong levels, In the long term, I am long biased. Right back up to this pivot high right here. However, on the weekly chart, since there was a strong long trade that formed, and a weak short trade that formed, in the short term, I'm long biased. Right back up to this pivot high right here. Okay, let's talk entries. Okay, this is a weekly chart. For a full explanation on what's been happening in price in this entire area, please refer to the Forex Recap series. Okay, but the most latest move that happened was that there was a weak short trade that formed and a strong long trade. And so the bias was long, or in other words, price was likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And so I was waiting for a pullback roughly at least to this 1.3300 levels for a long entry. However, this week, there was actually a new weekly short trade that formed right here. However, this short trade was again weaker than this last long trade. So the bias remains long. However, at this point, price is likely to reach this pivot high before reaching this pivot low. And so for the time being, if price falls down to this 1.3300 levels and beyond, I'm still willing to take a long entry. However, now the main target is at this pivot high, while the main stop loss is at this pivot low. Okay, and moreover, as price pulls back to this long entry level, I do want to see confirmation on the lower time frame of the legitimacy of this weekly long bias. Let me just show you what I'm looking for. Let's go over to the 4-hour chart. Okay, so what we've been seeing on this lower time frame up to this week is that there was consistently short-term short strength forming, which is good because I do want that pullback down. Now, the first thing we got was a breakout of this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here at this point, and no immediate break back in, signaling that this short-term 4-hour long strength was waning. And moreover, at this point right here, there was a 15-minute fake HNS, which signals short-term short strength again, and so price came down here. And then moreover, at this point this week, there was a 1-hour fake double bottom that formed. And if you recall in my midweek analysis, I was willing to take a long entry early if price reaches target height level before reaching the stop loss level right here. However, price did not reach that level and price came right back down, signaling short-term short strength again on the 1-hour chart. Now at this point right here, there's a couple levels I'm looking at to see if we could get this continued short strength right down to the 3300 levels. So, all right, so let me show you what I'm looking at in terms of confirmation. So let's go over to the 1-hour chart. Okay, so on this 1-hour chart, the two trend lines I'm looking at is this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. So what I want to show short-term short strength is for price to break out of this trend line and not immediately break back in. Okay, so if it wiggles around a bit and then breaks back in, that's a good thing because that shows short-term short strength. And moreover, on the top side, I'm watching this trend line from this pivot to this pivot right here. So in this case, what I want is for price to break it out and immediately break back in to signal short-term short strength. Okay, so let me just actually wrap this up on the weekly chart. Okay, so again on this weekly chart, as price reaches this 1.3300 levels roughly in these areas for this long trade, I ideally will want to even further pull back down, minimizing my risk to the stop loss level at this point right here. So again, I'll be watching the lower time frames to first of all confirm if there is short-term short strength left. Then I'll wait for a further pullback down for that long entry. And moreover, after I enter a long trade, I do want to see that short-term short strength starting to base out and short-term long strength kicking back in, basically making a U-turn and confirming that this weekly long bias is in fact legitimate. Okay, and again, remember, my main target at this point will be at this pivot high right here. Okay, all right, so that's it for the weekly forecast. I hope you guys have a great week, and thanks for watching. Okay, bye.